Greetings. Welcome to Into the Light. My name is Donald Schmid, and the topic of today's show is God will make a way. Sometimes in life we go through stuff and we don't know why, and we pout and everything, and we say, why me, a nice guy like me, and for a long time, nothing good ever happened to me. You know, it was one thing after another, and I didn't understand why, and I was always mumbling, grumbling, and complaining. And there was a time in my life where I was going to church. I had just given up drinking and drugging. It was like 1994 and 95. I'm not positive, but there was this woman, and she gave me a tape, and it was God Will Make a Way. And I listened to it. I listened to it over and over and over again. And I want to give you a verse that I'd like to read from the Bible. Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to Him, and He will make your paths straight. So I did this for a while, and I'd listen to it. You know, I didn't believe it, and it goes, God will make a way where there seems to be no way. He works in ways we cannot see. He will make a way for me. He will be my guide, hold me closely to His side. With love and strength for each new day, He will make a way. By a roadway in the wilderness He leads me. Rivers in the desert shall I see. Heaven and earth will fade, but His word will still remain. And He will do something new today. And I did it over and over and over and over and over. I did it in the morning. I did it at noontime, and I did it at night for about 18 months. And gradually, things started to get better. You know, it always wasn't puppy dogs and rainbows, but it got better, and it got better gradually. And I continued to go to church, and I was like, God will make a way, God will make a way, God will make a way. And the more I said it, the more I started to believe it. I got involved at church. I helped out making, doing tapes. You know, I was asked to volunteer. I made myself available. I went to meetings. We met on Wednesday nights at somebody's house, and we got together. I went to a church in Glendale, over on Myrtle Avenue, right off of Woodhaven. It was St. John's. I think it was St. John's Lutheran Church. And they had a good program there, and they helped people, and you know. And I went to another church. I would go to a Pentecostal church, and I would go to that church, you know. And God will make a way. God will make a way. God will make a way. And then I heard God say, you didn't choose me, I chose you for such a time as this. And I want to read about God choosing us in the first book of Jeremiah. Jeremiah, chapter 1, verse 4. The word of the Lord came to me, saying, before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart. I appointed you as a prophet to the nations. Ah, alas, sovereign Lord, I said, I do not know how to speak. I am too young. But the Lord said to me, do not say I am too young. You must go to everyone I send you to and say whatever I command you. Do not be afraid of them, for I am with you and will rescue you, says the Lord. Then the Lord reached out his hand and touched my mouth and said to me, I have put my words in your mouth. See, today I appoint you over the nations and kingdoms to uproot and tear down, to destroy and overthrow, to build and to plant. And combined with this, God will make a way. I know you, I chose you before. You're not a surprise to God. You may be going through stuff. You've never seen the show before. You might have seen me in the neighborhood and everything, but you didn't know me. You know, and I came here. Many of you know I was in a homeless shelter from 2011 and 2012. I had said a prayer. I said, God, I'm ready. I said, God, I'm willing. I said, God, you're able. I lost my job, I lost my income, I lost my apartment, and I wound up in a homeless shelter in Bushwick called Ready, Willing, and Able. And when I was there, I had opportunities to help others. You know, it was predominantly black and Hispanic. It was about 95% black and Hispanic, and 5% other, you know, being me. And they had saved me a bed. I had gone there on a Saturday, and my friend knew somebody with the Department of Homeless Services, and they took me to this Ready, Willing, and Able on a Saturday. And I slept on my friend's couch. Sunday and Monday morning, I went to Bellevue to get a housing number so I could go that. But before that, a few weeks before that, I had gotten a scholarship to Nyack College. And now I'm faced with making a decision, you know, do I continue to stay on my friend's couch, which was a month already, and the landlord didn't know the whole true story, you know, or do I go to the homeless shelter and not go to college anymore? So I made the choice, and I didn't want to go to the shelter, and I went to the college, and I saw this guy. He was friends with me, and he's telling me, I says, I don't want to go back. I don't want to go, you know, I don't want to go to the shelter. And he looked at me like a father figure. He says, you know what you got to do. So I says, I got to go back, right? So I had a moment of clarity, and I went back, and I don't know how long I was going. I'm a little messed up with the timeline. Nyack was on Broadway, not far from City Hall. But I believe we're living in a movie, and it's God's movie. And God is the director. And we're to cast the characters. And I believe throughout history, he knew and chose every person that ever lived. So, like, there was this scene that Jesus had just come on the scene, and he was talking to some fishermen, and he said, come, follow me. So the director, you know, who's leading the shot and the show and everything, he says, okay, cue Jesus, now cue the fishermen. So fast forward 2,000 years later, he's still the director, and we're still the cast of characters. But sometimes we want to tell the director what to do. because things aren't happening fast enough. You know, and we want to make it happen. We want to make it work. When people come to know Jesus, like he met the fisherman, and he said today, he says, "You're fishermen today, but I'm going to make you fishers of men." You know, when they looked at him, you know, and God will make a way. God will make a way. God will make a way. Cue the fisherman. So it was like, cue the homeless shelter. Cue Donald, cue his friends and everything. And I did a show. It was called Just Say Yes. We don't have to know how we're going to do something. You see, a lot of times, he gives us something to do that we can't do until we say yes. He gives us the ability to do it. Like I may not have had the ability to do something prior to him calling me to do it. But when I said that in that moment, yes, it qualified because he gives me the ability to do things I couldn't do, you know, when I said no or when I didn't say yes. And there's a verse, not a verse, but I was writing in this book, and it says, you might be having a bad moment, you know, but don't keep moving forward. I wrote, stop letting the memory of a bad yesterday ruin a potentially good today or sabotage an awesome tomorrow. So God will make a way. God will make a way. There's this woman, you know, we want things to happen. We want them to happen fast, and we want them to happen yesterday. And the last show that I did in 2022 was called Stay in the Moment. You know, lots of times we live our life in fast forward. You know, we can't wait to get to tomorrow. Or we live it in rewind. You know, the director wants us to see how it's going to play out. So when we stay in a moment, which is the play button, when you hit play, you may not understand what happened the last 35 months. You may have lost your job. You may have lost a family member. You may have lost hope. Maybe you turned your back on God. You didn't like what was going on, and you were forced to take a jab that you didn't want to take. I know about that. I don't want to take it. But I was told that you have to have, you know, the passport, and you can't go out to eat, you can't have any entertainment, you can't go bowling, you can't go to the gym. The walls are closing in on you. They tried to shut us up and keep our mouths shut, put masks on us, you know, and everything. But God's bigger than the pandemic. And he's bigger than what we're going through. You know, I'm sorry you're grieving. If I could take it away, I would. But there was a time in my life where both my parents were diagnosed with cancer within a week of each other, back in 1994. You know, and that's right around the time I started saying God will make a way. My dad passed away in December of 94. My mom passed away in 2000. She would live for another 5 years, you know, but he chose us to be in a movie, to keep moving forward, to reach out to others. I go to a church on Richmond Avenue at 1501. It's called International Christian Center. And our motto is, reaching the city, touching the world. And recently we got a phone call from the city asking us could we feed the asylum seekers Thanksgiving dinner. And we did, and we had a planning meeting, and we had 110 volunteers show up at the planning meeting, and had 100 volunteers on Thanksgiving Day. And when people lose hope and they bounce around from place to place and they're not wanted, it's real easy to get discouraged. You know, there's the battle going on. Should we close the wall, this and that and everything? Jesus says, come to me, all you who are burdened and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. So it's like when you have these two draft animals and they have a harness and it goes over, it's called a yoke. And they put an apprentice, a beginner with a veteran. And Jesus is the veteran. So he's meeting us where we're at. And now we're yoked with Jesus. We're not yoked to the burdens of the world. Because he says, my yoke, because Jesus is actually carrying the weight. You know, and we're just like going through the motions, looking at the director, Jesus, who is the author and the finisher of our faith, and he who began a good work in you will be faithful to complete it. He knows what you're going through. He knows when you sit and when you stand, and he has all your tears in a bottle. Weeping endures for a night, but joy comes in the morning. And when Jesus was crucified, buried, and resurrected, and his disciples had lost all hope, and they wept that night on the cross and everything, they thought they'd never see him again, but he told them he was coming back. And they thought he was crazy, and you know, they went to the tomb, and the tomb was empty. You know, he came back. He knows what it's like. He knows the pain and the burden. He was spit on, and he was bludgeoned to death, and you know, they stuck a thing in his side, and he went through tremendous pain. But you were worth it. For God so loved the world that he sent his one and only Son to live and die for you that you might live. See, when we're going through stuff, it's important that we cast our cares on him because he cares for us. We can't carry the burden when we're yoked with misery, anger, depression, you know, and we can exchange it for his righteousness, his peace, and his joy. You know, they had joy when they saw him, when he was in that room, and then Thomas wasn't there, and he says, you know, Jesus walks through the wall, and he goes up to Thomas, and he says, you know, he says, I'm not going to believe unless I see. You know, and then Thomas saw his hands, and they had the marks, you know, the holes in his hands. And Jesus said to Thomas, you know, you believe because you see, but blessed are those who believe and don't yet see. You see, he's the way maker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. You're not in it alone. When I started this show, I knew nothing about TV. I knew nothing about production, direction, and everything. But when I said yes, God took my yes, and then he equipped me with the ability to go through, to get through. You know, the woman said, There are no drive-through breakthroughs. You have to go through to get through. And I came here and I sat and I listened and I watched and I took the classes and they had hands-on experience and it was like, not that it was an audition, but it was like a final exam. And you had to be the director, you had to be the cameraman, and you had to work the TriCaster, and move the cameras to camera 1, camera 2, and then 3. This is Studio B. We used to be in Studio A. It was a little bit bigger and more elaborate. But I didn't know how to do that, but he knows tomorrow before we ever get there. Yesterday's history, tomorrow's a mystery, today's a gift. That's why we call it the present. Stop hitting fast forward. Stop hitting rewind. Just say yes to the director of all things. And if he can take me from drugs and alcohol, 3 suicide attempts, almost bled to death twice, almost froze to death, almost died at birth, 4 head traumas, 3 horseback riding accidents, 8 months in a psychiatric hospital, 15 months in a homeless shelter. Sometimes the director puts you in a position that's uncomfortable for you, that's going to help you help tens and hundreds of people who were in the shelter. You see, we had to play nice in the shelter because what are you going to get thrown out? And we have a joke around here like, what am I going to be, homeless because we got thrown out for fighting? But I had a roof over my head, and I never slept in the street, and he knew where I was at all times. It wasn't fun, but it was necessary. And when we were going on job searches, I wound up working in the Ready, Willing, and Able back office where we did data processing and we did stamps and everything and big mailings, and I would teach the new recruits the data processing. Was something that God allowed me to be good at. I was always good with numbers and everything, and I was good at repetition. You're only a beginner once. There's a universal law. It's called it's like a mentor and a protege, right? The mentor is teaching a new kid on the block what to do, and they teach them. Then they demonstrate, and then they let them do it. It's called teach, demonstrate, and coach. Now that newbie haven't been taught by the expert who had been doing it for 30 years and had used this system of teach, demonstrate, and coach. It didn't matter that he only had 1 day on the job. God gave him that ability to recreate it. Show him what to do. Show him how to do it. Let them do it. You see everybody arguing over this and that, and life is short. There's more. There's more. I don't know how to say it, so I'm not going to say it. I'm just going to say there's more. And when I find out what that more is, I'll let you know. But I went to St. Mary Gate of Heaven in Queens, and, we had our 50th anniversary in 2018, and I was on my way to Kentucky the next day. We were going on a mission trip, and I was up for 37 hours straight, and I was tired, and it looked like I was drunk because, my eyes were like splits. I looked like I was Chinese, and, and everybody says, you're okay. I said I was okay, but I wasn't okay. And LaGuardia that night, knowing that I had to go get the flight to Cincinnati to get the van to go to, Kentucky, was was interesting, and it was raining, and we got there, and we wound up going to a senior citizens home, you know, and they don't have a lot of visitors, and they were playing this thing called like Pokino, with like these really big cards, and I asked, could I, you know, I was helping the people like with their lines on their cards and everything, and I asked, could I call the next game, like you'd hold the card up, and it was maybe 20 people, it was like ace of hearts, and you like move it around and everything. But they weren't doing good up until that time, so I had to think of something really funny. So I just said, I'd have married my horse, but I couldn't afford no bridal suite. Well, they started cracking up. It changed the atmosphere. It changed the mood. They had a good time. Administration was very, very, very happy because now the people were animated because God wanted to make a way. But sometimes you have to do something that appears to be extremely foolish without knowing what the outcome's going to be. You got to take that leap of faith. You got to take that step out into the unknown, not knowing what tomorrow holds, but knowing who holds your tomorrow. So don't get stuck in yesterday. You know, let it go. I like corny cartoons, and I went to see Let It Go, Let It Go, Let It Go. And then Cole's around Christmas time, they're playing the songs, you know, Let It Go. You know, God's got you. He knows your tomorrow. He's going to be with you in a moment. And just say yes, because God will make a way where there seems to be no way. He's the director. He needs you to be in his cast of characters, but he's got the role. Like when they have Jeopardy, it's like, Alex, actors in their roles for 200, please. You know, the answer is God's in charge, you're not. You know, so I'm blessed. I'm grateful. I give God all the glory, honor, and praise. We're at 1501 Richmond Avenue. Saturday mornings we have a men's breakfast, so you could come join us, you know. Don't give in. Don't give up. Yesterday's history. Tomorrow's a mystery. Thank you. God bless you. And we'll see you next time on Into the Light. Goodbye.